Hello folks, so it's me again. We've been getting a lot of requests about how does HTML, CSS, and JS work with Flask, and we realized that we have set you guys a little challenge of using them together, and we didn't tell you guys how they actually can work with each other, and that's a big problem. And we know, me and as well as all the MasseyHack team, realize we've done a little bit of a whoopsie doopsie, and here it's gonna be how we're gonna fix it. We're gonna make you guys. They made me to do another workshop, not paid by the way, and yeah. So hopefully I can solve you guys some problem. So I will be starting off talking about actually why we need front end and back end in the first place. So the big problem with just having a big front end is that it is very, very insecure. So what I mean by that is if you have just a big giant front end, you can just inspect element and you can get all of the information. All of the we're talking about the data that you might have stored, right? We're talking about like user information, sensitive information you might have, and obviously you don't want everyone to see that, right? So how we can do that to bypass this problem is we can have a server that has our secure information, and we can let the server send this information only if some certain condition matches. So we can have something like we want to get a cool little web page, and what we can do is we need to have a set of username and password, and we have to match. Then we're allowed to get that page from our server, so we can request that page and then give them the username and password, and then the server is going to be processing if the password matches the username. If it is match, then we're going to send something back to the front end, and that's going to be the general idea of how front end and back end interact with each other. So how about let's actually do a little bit of coding now. I'm going to make a little example of what I mean by this. So for this example I'm making is I'm gonna make something that takes in a username. So you request with a username and password, and then the server is gonna check if the username matches with the password, and it's gonna return an HTML page back to the front end. So that is what I'm gonna show you guys today. Let's get started. So I like to just run through actually the jumps. I'm gonna run through the front end real quick. So what I have set up for the front end, it's really straight simple. We have the index.html, nothing blank again. I just have a style sheet set up and a script linked up as well. So the style.css and script.js. So I just have linked the CSS and JS to my HTML. Nothing really fancy here. So let's go now to the Flask end, so the back end. In this Python file, we can see we have just set up this, so don't worry about this, I'll talk about that later actually. So we have just set up a bare bone Flask file, so it's just from Flask, import Flask, app equals Flask, and then name, and then I'm pretty sure James already told you guys about these bare bone stuff, and it shouldn't be a big leap for you guys to question these things. But yeah, I think these are pretty straightforward for you guys. So now I'm going to talk about this little function I've made here. So this function, what it does is it takes in a JSON file, and then it will return it as like a Python file, because Python you can't just use JSON file directly. You gotta turn the JSON file into like a Python object, like a list or a dictionary. So yeah, so let's talk about the JSON file. Again, JSON file, if you don't know, you can search up. It's just like a file with a very intuitive, I guess, very accessible formatting of datas. And I think, I'm pretty sure James has covered that as well in his workshop, so it shouldn't be a stranger to y'all. Inside this JSON, I've set up a little dictionary, and I've set the key as the username, and then the value as the password. So this user is going to be supermage03, and then the password for this user is going to be I love Overwatch. And here's another user. I call it Overwatch 2 beta tester, and the password for Overwatch 2 beta tester it's called a cool guy, basically, because Overwatch 2 beta tester are all cool guys. I hope, and I'm pretty sure. Don't ask me why. So yeah, that's about it, I'm pretty sure. So let's run through the backend real quick. Let's recap what James has taught you guys, hopefully. So we can have something called app.route. So this is going to be routing and creating an endpoint, right? So we can create an endpoint called get cool page here, and we can have set the method to get to make sure. So we're gonna eventually set the method to post, because we're gonna send, we're gonna be let's say the server. It's gonna be processing data that front end it's gonna send, right? Front end it's gonna send the username and password. So it's gonna be a post method, because front end it's also sending some data to the server end. But for just a quick warm-up and a test, I'm just gonna make a get request real quick and show you guys what happens then, and then show you guys what happened with the post request. So yeah, I'm just gonna set this up, the get cool page, and boom, we can say return hello world. So this is just a little quick test. And reformat, why not? All right, okay. Let me run this. And now go to your browser, right? So for a get request, what we can just do is, first of all, we copy and paste where our server origin is at. So it's at this origin, and then we have the endpoint set to get cool page. So get cool page. And I'm pretty sure James has covered this. If you just put this as URL and then alongside your endpoint, what happened is it's automatically gonna set to a get request, because when you put this and you just go to this endpoint, it automatically defaults to a get request. And again, so get request, and then it's gonna say hello world, and we can see that is exactly what we made it to do. So we can return hello world. We set it there, and they return hello world. So cool. What if we made this a post request now? What you can see is if we refresh, now it says method not allowed, right? Because if we just access this just by going to on your browser, type in this whole entire URL, it's gonna send a get request instead of a post request, and this endpoint only accepts post requests, so it's gonna say method not allowed. Cool. So you might be asking now, well, then how do we do a post request? Because James used something called Insomnia, and obviously Insomnia it's not our front end, right? So how do our front end actually do a post request, right? Because we want the front end to request stuff. Now, what we can do is for HTML, there's mainly two ways you can do this, and both ways are situational. But in our case, so actually, I'm gonna say each one what they are. So the first one is gonna be use something called a form. So a form, it's an HTML element, and you can do a post request with that, and that's what I'm gonna show you in this workshop. You have another thing called fetch API, which you can do in a JavaScript style. You can use something called fetch API, and both of them are situational. It depends on what you want to achieve, how you want to achieve something. You might want to use form, and you might want to use fetch. For simplicity, and also just for our example here, where we just want to request a cool page, just a page from the server, a form is actually suffice. So that means I'm leaving you guys to actually do some research on the fetch API if you guys have time. And if you guys really want me to make another workshop for it, if the demands are there, I'll just make a separate one. If a lot of people opens a ticket saying, hey, Eston, I want to do something like that, and I say like search up fetch API, and if a lot of people ask me for that, then I am just gonna make a video about it as well. So yeah, so if you guys want to see that video, make sure to just send it in the chat, and I'll read it, and if a lot of people wants it, fine, I'll just make one. Yeah, keep in mind, I'm not paid. Hate these MasseyHacks teams. I'm being exploited. Anyways, oh well, I actually have to sign up for it. I actually don't sue them. But yeah. So in this form, we can see that my IDE actually already set up an attribute called action. So inside this action, it's gonna be our URL. So what we put here. So this is our origin and our endpoint for our request. So in this case, it's gonna be this. So I'm gonna Control C this, Control V it into this action. Alright, cool. And we're gonna have method, and we're gonna set the method to post. So yeah, because we're doing a post request again. So inside this form, obviously we want to take inputs, right? We want a username, and also we want a password. So what we can do is we can take, we want to take input, right? So how are we going to take input? Surprise, surprise, there's a tag called input. So we just do input, and boom. And we want to set the type to text, because it is a form of text input, right? Username, you have to type some sort of letters in there, right? It's not going to be some weird and wacky input like a checkbox, let's say, right? But yeah, anyways, let's get started. So for input, we need an ID attribute, and we also need something called the name attribute, and well, I'll talk about that later and why we need those. So in ID, the ID we're gonna call it, so the first one, it's usually username, right? So the first input is usually username and then password. So we're gonna set this both to username. And if we just refresh the page, oh, okay, sorry, that is no right one. So that's the front end, that was the back end. So in the front end, if we refresh the page, we're gonna see a box, an input box. And obviously we wanna indicate that this is a username, right? How we're gonna do that? So we can use something called a label. A label takes in an attribute called a for. So for, if I just hover this and then my IDE tells me, it's the ID of the labelable. So in this case, the ID of the input, which is username. So we copy and paste that into this attribute for. So now inside this label, we want to put, you know, actually we want to display username in our HTML. So we put username, boom, and it's going to say username. Cool. And we can copy and paste this because we're going to have another input called password, right? For password, we can do password, and then Control C and Control V these, and then we can do password for that, and boom. And just for the styling, I want to make it row to row, so it doesn't like do something like that. So what we can do is we can just, again, for my workshop, I did talk about div, right? Div is a block element. So again, I talked about block element briefly. Again, I know I didn't do a quite a in-depth job about all these display types, but for div, it's a block element, and a display block element, what it does, it will stack row to row. So if we just have these two, if we wrap these two separate input under two different div, then it's gonna be block row to row. So boom, and that's row to row. And obviously we want to have some sort of a button to do the request, right? To submit the form. So we can have a button, boom. And the button, inside button, we can have an attribute called type. And the type of button we want to specify for this case is submit, right? Because we want to submit the form and initiate HTTP post request. So we do type submit, and then we can call inside this button, we can say like get the cool page, boom, and boom, and we can see get the cool page, it's in there. And we have set this up. We can do is, if we do a post request right now, we should be getting a hello world because we didn't do any authentication yet. So if we do this, get cool page, and it says hello world, it didn't give us this 405 method not allowed because this is a post request. In our front end, we set the method to post, so it is a post request. So now you might be wondering, well, Eston, now we should do the authentication part now, right? How do we get the data of whatever we inputted in the username input box, and also what we input for password in the password input box? How do we actually get that into our Python, right? Into our Flask? Well, the beauty of using a form style is that when you automatically do a post request, the inputs are gonna be stored in kind of like a Python dictionary style, with the key being the name, and then the value correspond to this this name, this input. It's gonna be the input content itself. So yeah, so actually, you know, I'll stop the talking and actually show you guys what I mean by this. Is we can do print, and then we can print something called, actually, I'll show you guys, data equals request dot data dot form. So again, okay, I forgot to input. So in Flask, you have something called request, and then yeah, we have to import that real quick. And then we can do a request.form. So because we use it in a form style, we can just do request.form, and then it's gonna get all the input data of the form. For us, we have two input element, one for password, one for username. So if we just print this data real quick, so let's do that real quick. So we print it, and it says it's an immutable multi-dictionary. It has the username and the password again. So that's what I was talking about. So the name, it's gonna be the key. So again, so the name says username, and the username is the key in this case. And then the value is the actual input content of this username in input. So right now we did nothing. So yeah, when we request it, we put nothing in both boxes. So we are just doing nothing. So we are giving it an empty string, and yeah, it's an empty string. So that is what we expect, and that is what we got. We printed it, right? So now because it says it's an immutable dictionary, right? Like, I'm gonna convince you guys it works the same way as a normal dictionary. I'm just gonna do data. Now we're gonna do username. So I'm just gonna do request get the username get the key username's value inside data, just like a normal dictionary. Boom, and boom. It should. Oh, sorry, I forgot to rerun this. Sorry about that. Big income. And boom, it gives you SD, just as what a normal dictionary would be. Now it just says immutable multi-dictionary, but it works the same way. Immutable just means you can't change the value if you're curious. So, but we can still request and get it, still can access it. Yeah. So now with that done, we want to do the authentication just for the ease of accessing these username and password. I'm just going to create a variable called username. And then we're going to set the data with the key username. Sorry, if I can spell. And then we can have password equals data password. And boom. That's it. So that's just for ease of access. And now we got the username and password that the front end sent us. Now we are gonna match them with what we have in this users.json. So why don't we just first read the JSON first, right? So we have this method set up called read.json. It's gonna make our life easier. So we're gonna say users. It's gonna be equal to read.json. And then the path for it is just users in our case, because the app.py and the users.json, it's in the same folder, so we can just do users.json for the path of our file. So now user is gonna have a dictionary of the key being the username, and then the value respond to that username. It's gonna be the password for that username, and boom. Now, what we can do is we can now just, do the matching part, right? First of all, we want to make sure that the username actually it's actually a key in the users, right? Because what's the point of checking username and password if the username it's not even a valid user in our database in the first place, right? If it's not even in our database. So what we can do is we can just rat out them by saying if if username it's in users. So what this says is Python checks if this username it's a key of users. So in this case, the key of users we should have is supermage_03 and Overwatch 2 beta tester. So if the username that we've sent from our front end is either supermage03 or Overwatch 2 beta tester, then this if statement should be true. But if it's not true, and that's where we're gonna that's how we're gonna filter it out, is if we check if it's not true. So if user name in user it's equal false, what I like to do is just if not username in users, and they are the same thing, by the way. If user equals false, they mean the same thing, by the way. So if username in user equals false, they mean the same thing. But I just like to use if not user in username, username in users. But those means the same thing. Then what we do is we want to return, right? And then we can do something like we can send some message, right? So sending a message, we can do JSONify and we can send them a JSON, right? So we can do JSONify and we can say message. And then corresponding message, we can say the user name is not even in the database, in the JSON. Why even be cool? And send an info, something like that, something aggressive, because we hate people that try to be imposters, right? So we can send a 400, and that's that's a HTTP code that you can send. So a code just means what error, so people can debug what's wrong with it. 400, it's a general error, and I'm pretty sure they are more specific. There's 401 and 4 something. There are more specific code, but if you do 40, it's in general. Again, I can't think of all the specific code in the top of my head. What I like to do usually is I just search them up, and then if I just go down the list and see like a error description that fits mine, and I will set that to a specific error. But in this case, I'm going to set a general one because I cannot think of one on the top of my head. And then after we rat out all the username being in the user itself, so if it's not in it, we return and exit this whole entire function already. So if Python reads the code that we're gonna write below, that means that it has passed this check and make sure that the user name is actually a key inside this user .json. So now we can check the password now, right? So if we have a valid username, then we're gonna check the password that we've delivered from the backend. From the front end to our backend to check with the password we have in our backend that matches with the username that again we've sent. So we can do some we can do the actual password and user matching in this place. So we can do if password that we have given from our front end, it's not going to be equal to the users with this username. So users username, so users is this dictionary so far, and then with this username is going to return the value with the key of this username. So that's going to be the password corresponding to this username. So if they're not the same, if we have a mismatch, we're going to return something like wrong password. Imposter, right? Send something like that, and that's about it. So now if we just do some quick testing, so now if we just rat out these two, what we have left should be if a password and a user both matches and it is in our database. So then we return hello world. Or in this case, we can just say only you are a cool guy. So that's going to be the content of our cool page. All right. So if we rerun this, and we can do some testing. So we can do a username that doesn't exist. You should say this username, it's not even a JSON because it's not SuperMage03 and it's not Overwatch 2 beta tester that we have set up in our JSON. So, but what if it is, right? What if it is Overwatch 2 beta tester, but it's the wrong password for the Overwatch 2 beta tester? So boom. Is going to say wrong password imposter. So wow. So what happened is it passed the first check, but it didn't pass the second check of the password being the one that the same one we stored in our JSON file. That's good. What if we do have the same password now, right? So what if we have a match, right? So we have the right username, the right password. We just do get the cool page, it should say you're a cool guy. And that is exactly what we did. So it passed the username, right? So Overwatch 2 beta tester, it is indeed a username that we store in JSON file, and the password that we've given matches the password of the Overwatch 2 beta tester that we've stored in our JSON file. So that is a big thumbs up, and we should just return "you're a cool guy" here. So with that being said, you might be asking, well, for a cool guy, "you're a cool guy" is kind of underwhelming, right? You want to be swaggy for a cool guy, right? So what we can do is we can, send them something like an HTML file, right? That would be pretty cool. That would be pretty cool for a cool guy, right? So how are we going to do that? We can do is create a folder called templates under just in your Flask working folder. So I have already set up a folder called templates. So inside there, what I can do is I can create an HTML file. We're gonna call this cool page, right? So I call this cool page. Again, this is just a quick HTML setup, and inside the body we can have an h1 tag, and we can do "you are very cool," and then exclamation mark, and then we can do a paragraph tag here, and we can say "you must play Overwatch because cool people plays Overwatch." And that is fact. Again, don't fact check him. Just make sure just knows that he's correct. And that's all you need to know. Yeah, people play Overwatch is indeed very cool. So now we can just send this back to, inside of "you're a cool guy," we actually send a whole HTML file, right? So what we can do is we can import something called render template from Flask, and instead of returning "you're a cool guy," we can return a render template, and then the name, we call it a cool page.html. And again, this render template has a path relative to the folder templates. So for cool page, that sits right under templates. It's just going to be cool page. And that should work. And also we can send HTTP code 200. So 200 means success. Yeah. So now if we rerun this, now instead of using Overwatch 2 beta tester, we can use supermage_03 as well, because this should work for him as well. And then we can get the cool page. Oh, I forgot. Sorry. You have to rerun the Flask app for it to work. Right. So we do that, and boom, you are very cool. See, it returned this template back at you. It returned this HTML back at you. So yeah, so if you have the wrong password and stuff, if you don't have the matching password, and if you're just a user, you won't be able to see this in any certain way. The only people that can see this is the people that knows the username and the corresponding password. So you can see how this is very secure. And that's about it. So hopefully you guys learned something from this workshop. And hopefully you guys enjoyed my voice. Again, it's actually 35 minutes. Wow. Didn't expect that. Yeah, so again, this is just one way of doing this, using this form element. There's another way called Fetch API. So if you guys want to learn more about that, you guys can search it up. Again, the YouTuber that I've recommended, I can't recommend enough. Web Dev Simplify has a video about this, and it's super good. And you can just search out Fetch API, and you will get a ton of good YouTube. YouTube these days are great information centers for all of you guys who want to learn website and web development stuff. So yeah, so learn about again Fetch API. that's your next step if you are interested. Again, if you and you can also use this form as well. Again, it's very situational. Depending on what you do, you can use form. But in some cases you have to use fetch API. So in that case, you just learn it by yourself. Again, if a lot of people demand for another video about fetch API, I'll do it if the demand is there. And yeah, so I'll be signing off. Yeah, thank you guys for watching this video all the way to the end. I'm not gonna say like and subscribe, but you guys can do that. And also, I don't know why you would like and subscribe MasseyHack, but we do welcome it. And yeah, so yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy your hacking, enjoy making your project, have a load of blast of fun, and yeah. So I'll be signing off. See you all. Take care and peace.